Hello everyone, this is Shlok, and today we are breaking down the biggest current affairs topics of the third week of March 2025. Quick, sharp, and to the point. Plus, I'll be sharing my interview takeaways on some of these topics. So, without further ado, let's get started. Our first key update is that New Zealand and India have resumed talks on a free trade agreement. The key update here is that the Prime Minister of New Zealand, Christopher Luxon, was at New Delhi, and the main goal of the meeting was to resume talks for a free trade agreement. Now, let's get a quick economics 101 on what a free trade agreement essentially is. A free trade agreement is a deal between two or more countries, and the objective is to eliminate trade barriers. These barriers could be tariffs, these could be quotas, or this could be any other kinds of restrictions on the supply of goods and services. The goal here is to make trade easier, boost economic activity between the countries involved. Coming back to the latest free trade agreement negotiations, the Prime Minister of New Zealand came with the largest ever delegation so far, which shows that the level of importance that New Zealand is showing India. The delegation of New Zealand included business persons, artists, diplomats. Additionally, the talks also involved promises on defense cooperation. So that is one very major update that we must be aware of. One of the major points of discussion here again was the Khalistan separatist movement that has been brewing in New Zealand, and this is against the national interests of New Delhi. So that is something that we must be aware about, and this is yet another point of contention in these talks. Finally, these talks are part of the larger Raisina dialogue of 2025, which is going to be our next story. What exactly is the Raisina dialogue is the first thing that we are going to discuss. The Raisina dialogue is India's geopolitical and geo-economic conference. So what happens here is it brings together global leaders, policymakers, business executives, academics to discuss international issues such as security, ho gaya, technology, trade, climate change, and so on. So mainly what happens at the conference is there are different events which feature speeches, panel discussions, meetings, and essentially those conversations shape global governance and India's role in world affairs. The next obvious question that comes to mind is, what is the story behind the name? The Raisina Dialogue is named after the Raisina Hill in New Delhi, where India's most important government buildings are located. Hence, the name is supposed to symbolize India's role in shaping global policy discussions. Now let's jump into the Raisina dialogue of this year. The conference was held from March 17 to March 19th in New Delhi, and more than 3,500 people were in attendance from close to 125 countries. Moreover, this year's chief guest was the Prime Minister of New Zealand, something we've already discussed. Finally, the theme of the dialogue was something we must remember. It is Kala Chakra. What does Kala Chakra mean? Essentially entailing humanity, peace, and sustainability all are interconnected and they must go hand in hand. So that is the key theme of the Raisina dialogue this year. Next quick update from here is that Tulsi Gabbard was in India. Tulsi is the chief of US National Intelligence, and what does this mean for India? This means closer ties in terms of defense, in terms of intelligence sharing, and so on. So these are some of the essentials that wrap up this story. Up next, we have an important update from the Indian stock market. So there is some major good news for the Indian stock market. Friday was 21st March, which was the fifth straight session of the Indian market gaining momentum. So how do we know that this has happened? Overall, the Nifty 50 index, which is essentially showing the performance of India's top 50 companies, has gained close to 4% in the span of these 5 consecutive sessions. And what's the reason for this? The reason for this is that the United States has maintained its rate cut projections. What does this mean? This means that the United States wants to inject more money in the hands of the people, make them spend more, and grow the economy. But a simple question is, why do the Indian markets care about the United States? The simple reason is that in the globalized world of increasing trade, one economy's growth, especially that of such a giant like the United States, has huge ripple effects for all its trading partners, making the trading partners grow as well. What happens is that when the US consumers spend more, it leads to an increased money supply in India and the whole world rather. This creates a positive feedback loop. So this is something that is very crucial for us to understand. And this update we should give to anyone who maybe brings up the falling stock market. This positive update can be shared in a GD or in an interview scenario. So this wraps up our current affairs story in the stock market. The next big update is from China. But before that, I wanted to share a very useful resource that I stumbled upon for those of us who are preparing for CAT 2025. And that is the Postcard Club. The Postcard Club helps CAT aspirants prepare smarter using AI, and how they do that is through AI powered prep and interactive learning. So, how does it work? You go to the Postcard Club, and after a very simple registration process, you can jump into the CAT 2025 tab where you have a host of options. Let's say you're someone who needs help in the RC section. So we jump right into one of the chats, and there are a bunch of helpful tips and strategies that can aid in your preparation. Additionally, you can also click on the AI chat section to ask some specific doubts. The sign up link is added to the video description, and without further ado, let's get into our next current affairs update. China's $41 billion economic revival plan. So first up, some historical context. Why does China even need an economic revival? We all know China is a manufacturing hub, and now after the advent of DeepSeek, even a technology superpower. So what's wrong with China, and why do they even need a revival? It all lies in their economic growth figures. This is the property sector. First up is the property sector, which is now in a downturn. Chinese GDP was also growing at just 5% in 2024, and this is also the target for 2025, but this trend may not continue given the hit Chinese exports are going to take because of Donald Trump's tariffs. So what is the next step is that they want to improve consumer spending, and their consumer spending is also going down. People are holding back on purchases partly due to the property sector issues and a lack of confidence. Additionally, Chinese economy is looking at a deflation. China's consumer spending fell by 0.7% year on year in Feb 2025, marking the first deflationary trend in over a year. Now, finally, let's come to what's been happening lately and what is this $41 billion revival plan. Essentially, these $41 billion are a spending spree into subsidizing consumer goods such as home appliances, smartphones, and electric vehicles. And what's the goal here? Simple economics tells us that the goal here is to stimulate consumer spending and hence economic growth. Strong domestic consumer demand is must for achieving next year's growth target of 5%. So what's our interview takeaway from this? Let's get a global perspective on this. The first thing is that economies in the whole world are stimulating consumer spending and increasing money supply. We just saw what's been up in China, what's happening in China. We just saw that. And we are also going to talk about the India and the United States. In the United States, rate cuts are being discussed in order to increase the money supply. In India, budget is stimulating growth by increasing the disposable income through change in tax slab. All these signals point toward the fact that good times could be ahead for the global economy if these efforts lead to fruitful results in terms of increased consumer spending. So that is an important macroeconomic worldview that we must have. The next big update is from the sporting world. It comes from the city of Ahmedabad in Gujarat. India has submitted a bid to host the Commonwealth Games in the year 2030. And why is this important? Because India is eyeing the 2036 Olympics to be held in Ahmedabad, and this update is essentially a stepping stone in that direction. Ahmedabad will then become a front runner in this case if this bid is successful. A quick economics lesson here. Why are such big tournaments such a big deal? The reason is simple. These tournaments bring in revenue and foreign exchange in the form of tourism. In addition to that, this puts our Indian cities on the global map at par with cities such as Paris, New York, Tokyo, etc. If such tournaments are successfully organized, this adds to India's soft power for the country, wherein India can make further solidify its role as a key decision maker in the global south. Our next big update is Elon Musk and his AI chatbot Grok. This is a rather interesting story wherein an ex-user went ahead and asked Grok that what are his 10 best mutuals or something along those lines. And when Grok took a little too long to respond, what happened is the ex-user essentially abused the chatbot or used some colorful language, and Grok shot back at the user. He not only gave, or it not only gave the 10 best mutuals, but it also used some Hindi slangs that may not be appropriate for, let's say, language chatbot at such a huge scale. So on the final takeaway here is that India's IT ministry is already in touch with X regarding Grok's use of inappropriate language, and that is the main part about this rather fun AI story. In addition to that, Grok has also entered, made some political remarks, calling our Prime Minister Narendra Modi's interviews that they seem rather scripted, and there are a bunch of such political comments, and that is the reason why Grok has been in the news lately. But what is the key interview takeaway for us here? The key interview takeaway is that we can talk about how censorship could be necessary for AI chatbots. If let's say a discussion pops up in the field of AI, this is one example that could be used. If you want to check out the other weeks of March 2025, I also covered the first week and the second week of March 2025 that you can watch in the end screen. In addition to that, I would really appreciate some content creation ideas. And with that said, that's about it for this video, and see you in the next one.